Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leenika. I lead the Diversity and Inclusion Charter at Nasscom. And with that, I would request our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. Thank you.
So hi, my name is Rajnish Bohra. I look after learning, organization effectiveness and D&I at WNS. We've been with WNS for the last 9 years. Before that, I was in L&T.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jaykumar Tharwani. Feel free to call me Jay. I lead culture and diversity engagement for India for TCS, and my pronouns are he, him, his, and ally. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and pleasure to be here today with all of you. My name is Sreya Ghosh Oberoi. I'm taking care of diversity and inclusion for Capgemini. It's a 180,000 strong employee base in India. Before that, I've literally dedicated almost a decade of my life to D&I because I truly believe that this is something that organizations need to be successful, to be sustainable. I'd really want to also share a personal story of mine, why I began this journey. In between, after completing about 7 years of work, I decided to take a break. It was meant to be a study break. I completed my studies, but at the same time, I also was pregnant. And that pregnancy, after pregnancy, it ended up being extended because my husband decided to take a job outside the country. Now it ended up being 4 years. That was 2010. We didn't have programs that invited women on break to come back and join the corporate world. I realized at that time I had gone through self-esteem issues, lack of confidence. I just thought I probably cannot even, deal with the technology that there is today when I was ready to join back. I think that gap really helped me understand what a lot of women go through who have the will to be, to have a career, to continue, who have the skills and the talent, but does our corporate world give them an opportunity again? I think that is something that drove me. I was lucky, I had networked while I was working previously, and that's actually how I went back to working, through people who knew me and were willing to take that leap of faith. So I think that was something that made me believe it's really important to change the way corporate India looks at when it comes to different diversities, their abilities, and how they can actually give back to the organization. So thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mathew. I represent Landmark Group. I represent around 25,000 people who work with us, and there are another 25,000 who work with us off-role. DEI is something that I'm very passionate about, and that's the reason I travel all the way till here. And I think I thank the organizers for having such a good forum, not limited to retail, but also getting people like here on the panel from different industry. I think it gives us a good ability to cross-pollinate ideas, understand and appreciate challenges that specific industries face. So look forward to share my journey and the group's journey in terms of DEI.
Yeah. So I think the next question that I have, which is what Sreya just mentioned, is any story that made you guys passionate about this topic? Because I very strongly feel that you can't do this agenda till you are passionate about it. So we could start with you, Rajnish.
Actually, probably I'm the newbie in this area because I've taken over this particular role a couple years back, and honestly, I struggled initially because I have my own biases, and when I kind of was given this particular opportunity, I had to really unlearn a lot of my own, biases, right? And understand as to exactly what are the things that I need to. So I spoke to so many people, and make sure that I'm ready to kind of lead because we are a global organization. We are on 17 countries, 60,000 people. Um, but at a personal level, I think my only point was that in a world that is filled with hate, which is the most easiest thing because hate is so easy, right? Love is so difficult. I felt that it's a challenge to kind of influence love. And I think if I have an opportunity to kind of go ahead and influence love in the organization, I think that'll be an honor, in my opinion, and also an opportunity that will essentially kind of create a culture which I'm sure that will thrive not only now in the future as well.
Thank you, Rajnish, for sharing love in the organization. That's my takeaway from this conversation. My interest and attention to inclusion even started before my current role with TCS. It was an experience that stays with me. We were interviewing a candidate. All boxes were ticked, the skill set was in place, the attitude check was done. We kind of agreed that yes, this is the right candidate for the role. And at the end of the interview, the candidate asked us, where is the washroom? And that was the moment for us to realize that our washrooms were not designed for person with disabilities. And that moment was a moment that stayed with me. I was not part of culture and inclusion at that point of time, but everything I did since then, I tried to support the idea of inclusion, be it from the lens of accessibility, be it through the lens of social inclusion, and then I got the opportunity to being part of a fabulous organization and a fabulous team. So that's been the start of my journey and interest towards building culture and diversity and inclusion in whatever I do.
Alex?
Yes, so in fact, I can go on and on because I was finding it very difficult what experience to choose. But I think I'll share from my childhood. I was brought up in a very small town, which is the only employment opportunity there was a sugar factory and one of the largest there. And my mom was a school teacher, and I used to face a lot of contrast in that society, right? Because right from my grandmom, my mother, my sister, all of them are very powerful women, right? In terms that they are the ones who created, the freedom, brought up the families, of course, hard ways. But when I look in the society there, women were like, for example, if you were a casual laborer, women are paid 2/3 of what a man is paid, right? Even today, nothing much has changed. The turning point for me was I was one day walking from school and I witnessed a lady being burned to death by her husband. She was up in flames. And for almost 6 months, I was unable to fathom why this happened. I used to ask my mom, how can this happen? And, from then, for me, it was like, look, I see women in my family who are, very different. But out there in the society, I think women didn't get their due. And my sister was the first to ride a cycle in that town, right? And so just to tell an example, my mom was, B.Ed graduate in late 1960s. So coming from that kind of a empowered, family to look at a society where women are not given their due, women are in a way, disadvantaged. It always had this at the back of my mind, that it's not fair, right? And we need to be equitable, we need to be inclusive as a society. And I think that is something that even today drives me in terms of getting equal opportunity to everybody. It could be economic inclusion, it could be gender, or any sort of inclusion and diversity.
And my story is very similar. I've done about 27 years of working now without even a single career break. And I personally say I've lived through the journey of exclusion, and now is the time for me to make the inclusion happen. I think we all have our journeys like that. So with that, Sreya and all the other panelists, I think the question that I have today, the discussion is building inclusion ground up. What do you guys mean by saying building inclusion ground up, and why do we think it's very important for the ecosystem and the communities to start building inclusion ground up? Yeah, we could start from you, Shiv.
Yeah, so if we start with understanding what inclusion is, I think inclusion, in a very short summary, is the sense of belonging and the respect as a human being that you should get, and it should be there in your corporate work life as well. So, if we do not look at it as an ecosystem, I don't think that we will be able to achieve the results that we want to. So while I say, mostly we talk about diversity in the form of gender, we are now working on including people from, with disabilities or differently abled. We are looking at people from LGBTQI community. Think about it. I mean, it's not just people that you work with. It's your infrastructure. It's your partners or vendor partners you're working with. So every element needs to be looked at to truly become inclusive. So while we may have, washrooms for people with disabilities, we need to also have maybe a gender neutral washroom. While we think of ramps, which is an infrastructural requirement, we also need to think of digital inclusion, because we are hiring people who may have visual impairment or hearing impairment. And while we think of all of these things, think about the security guard who is, at the gate allowing your employees in. And you are, you want to be inclusive, you're hiring people from the transgender community. You hire a trans woman. In India we call them Hijra community. Think about the treatment that the guard will give if you didn't think of sensitizing them. So it's not just important for you to work with your own employees, your leaders. It's important to work with your partners. It's important to think of all the access that each and every individual will face in a workplace. And that's why it's, I think, important to think of the groundwork done while you do the sensitization, while you are hiring. I think hiring is probably the easiest thing to do, right? But when they walk in, and just now you heard Jay say that, we've almost hired this person, but are we actually truly inclusive? Because using a washroom is one of the basic needs of human beings. So I think that is why we think that the entire ecology of a workplace needs to be thought through.
I would add to what Sreya said. It's important also from the perspective when we say building inclusion ground up, that every individual, every associate, and when I say this, I'm talking about 450,000 people in TCS. So our endeavor is that every associate feels that psychological safety, or feels that the organization is a safe space for them to bring their true selves to work, for them to be who they are, for them not to necessarily want to fit into a certain culture that is defined either by the organization or the team or the leadership there. So building inclusion ground up simply for us is inclusion without exception, which is also the motto that we live by.
Your thoughts, Rajnish?
So, I think when we started this whole journey, I think a couple of things that we looked at was data, and we went to the people. We did a survey. We said that let's find out what is the operational state, because there could be a stated objective saying that we want to be inclusive, but it's not necessarily that's how it is in real life. And inclusion is such layered. I mean, I can be in this particular table and then be excluded because 3 of the people are not talking to me, right? So, so it's not necessarily about gender, neurodiverse. There's so much of microaggression that happens every single day in the teams itself. And inclusion, in my opinion, is also a personal journey. It's not an organizational journey. It's a journey that every individual takes. And we have to go and meet those people at their personal journey. So it's very difficult. The last mile reach out is the most difficult. So we looked at data, we did survey, we spoke to people. We felt that, we can't have a very centralized way of approaching inclusion in the organization. It has to be for the locations, what it matters to them. So we kind of made sure that, what inclusion is for Philippines vis-a-vis for Costa Rica, for say, China, for India is very, very different, right? And what we did was we said that let them decide what is it that's important for them, what matters to them, what are the challenges that they face. We have a broad agenda as an organization. We said that we have three focus areas. We said that, yes, respect is one of our values. We will not negotiate on that. And that's the core tenet of inclusion as far as we are concerned. The second part is about women. We said we will increase gender representation across leadership levels, and we have very aggressive programs around that to ensure that we have leaders that we are supplying internally. We're building talent internally. We also said we're going to focus on working mothers. That's a very, very specified area for us. And the last area for us is mental wellness. We felt that post-pandemic, a lot of us probably are struggling in this particular area. And I think how do we kind of give access to resources to people? Inclusion also for us is how do we really, really make anyone, LGBTQIA, people with disabilities, welcome to the organization. One of the things that Sreya talked about, which is we start at the security, because we also realize saying that you can have the best practices inside the organization, but somebody's ridiculing an individual just because the way they look at the security is non-negotiable. So yeah, I think that whole ecosystem understanding is very, very important. So that's how we are looking at it.
I think for me, grounds up inclusion is largely to cover the length and breadth of the country. Also to identify any group that is marginalized, which is not in the mainstream. Right now, based on how the society moves, there could be certain things that we will focus on. But if you look at retail, and I'm probably the only one who represents retail in this panel. And there is one strength in retail is that retail can reach the depths of the nation, right? If you are in a large IT organization, maybe beyond tier 2, you will not be able to reach out. Of course, people come to to work here. If you have a factory, you may only have in one location. But I think the advantage that retail has is that we can go to tier 3, maybe small towns, and make those societies, right, help them balance out maybe economic inclusion, gender, any kind of initiatives that we want to take. I think retail has the power to take it to the grassroots levels, penetrate deeper into the country. I think that's what grassroots level inclusion for me means.
And for us as Nasscom, I think inclusion is about, we very strongly believe that diversity and inclusion is not an agenda that you can do by yourselves. And, we very keen to partner with people. Like when I received a call from RAI, I said, yes, we'd be very happy to partner. Arman is sitting here from NCPDP. We're very keen to work with everybody to say, how could we make this agenda a reality? And if there is a possibility of building digital content on diversity and inclusion, because this is an ever evolving space, right? And everybody is on a different journey. So today for somebody, the priority is gender, somebody's talking about people with disability and so on. So I think there is a need to build that kind of advocacy, right? So that kind of best practices which others could learn from. So as Nasscom, we're very keen to build, and we have started to. We have a Nasscom community diversity and inclusion content, which is digital content on diversity and inclusion. And this is cloud source content. So this is not content that's written by us. We have a concept called ecosystem partners, which means you could partner with us to drive the agenda together. And in reciprocity, we request you to host content on our community page, which could be widely used. It's been more than 2.5 years that I've been running this journey. I don't remember I've said no to anything. I don't know till when can I continue like this, but for me, that's what inclusion is all about. Yeah. So with that, I think the next question that I have to both Alex and Jay here is about any pioneering initiatives or some innovative initiatives that you've had in your respective organizations to bring about this change, right? Building up inclusion ground up.
Alex, would you want to take that?
So I would like to talk about one of the initiatives. In fact, Nandini is here. She's the one who started it. This is called Swabhiman, which is that today in Max, one of the businesses under Landmark Group, we have around 10,000 people. Out of that, almost 6% are people with disabilities, 600 people. And this is something that we have been doing for years together, right? Probably some 8 to 9 years. And then we built it up from strength to strength. We realized somewhere, initially we started saying that we don't know how they will do, whether they will be able to meet the expectations at the store, how will they respond to the store environment. All that was sorted out. We realized that if we want to, diversity is one, that okay, we have hired them, we have given them a job, but now what do we do? How do we make them feel part of us? The challenge was that people were not able to communicate to them. How do you talk? They can't hear, they can't speak. And the store manager, if you have a morning huddle, these people are left out, not knowing what to do. So what we did after that is we did an initiative where we got all our trainers across the country. Everyone went through a sign language training. They went back, trained the store managers on sign language training. The department managers were trained by them. So this is what is inclusion. So the other challenge today we are addressing is that, okay, giving them a job is good, but what do we do after that, right? If they cannot speak, if they cannot hear, how will they lead a team? The next role, if they have to become a supervisor. So that's a challenge that we are trying to address. But this is one initiative I think we as a group are committed to. And one of the commitments that the leadership has made to the employees is that we are going to almost double this number this year in the next 12 months. That from 600, every store, the vision that we have is that every store should have minimum one PWD. And this is a commitment made right from the CEOs of all the businesses. I think that's something that I'm really proud of.
While there are various initiatives that we have for various diverse segment, be it gender, race, ethnicity, LGBTQ inclusion, PWD inclusion, I would specifically like to share two, because we being an organization of 650,000 people, it's important that we are also able to put a metric. And as they say, what gets recorded gets also improved. So from that lens, how do we establish KPIs? How do we make ourselves, our ecosystem, our leaders responsible for it? So we have an in-house tool called Diversity Maturity Matrix, and we've seen very good results. What we essentially do is we take a business unit, and there are a certain parameters on which we rate the unit. And it could include parameters on gender diversity, it could include parameters on women returning after maternity, what's the retention, who are we hiring, what's the diversity mix, do we have a D&I council, so on and so forth. And it has 5 levels, from ad hoc to generative. So then it helps us internally assess how our business units are doing on variety of diversity parameters, and basis where they are, there is a charter put in place, then there are annual targets, quarterly targets, and we've seen that it's helping, because now it's on the radar. There are PMOs who are tracking it. They are supporting, be it participation in a program, be it inviting external speakers, availability of leadership time, and so on and so forth. So that's one initiative that's really helped us. And the second one is a simple one, but what we've been doing for the last few years, and we are seeing very good response to that, is celebrating diversity. And how are we doing that? We are doing that by celebrating every opportunity to engage with diverse segments. Like for example, December, we are celebrating International Day for Persons with Disability. In fact, this Sunday, there was a Purple Light Up campaign. Many offices of TCS across the globe were lit up in purple color. The idea is to A, show our solidarity with the persons with disability and the entire community. B, also start this conversation. So even if I take a ballpark of 10% attrition in my organization, every year I have 60 plus thousand people coming in the organization. It's very important for us to educate them, to start conversation. Do they know the right language that they use when they're engaging with someone? How are they really preparing for a conversation? How can they contribute to making the ecosystem inclusive? And every year, even this year, we have internal speaker, external speaker, leaders who we invite for panel conversation. The whole idea is we need to build the visibility for celebrating diversity. And that's what's really, really working for us, if I could say.
Can I do a 45-second? So I just thought I'll just talk about one of our initiative, which we are very proud of, which is, we call it Centurion. We said that we will fund 100 women leaders into the organization fold. It's a very aggressive program. We actually take people at an assistant manager, and then we move them to an AVP in flat 2.5 years. For a top talent in the organization to even go through that program would have taken 7 years. So we have collapsed the time by 50%, and we've already funded 45 women leaders to the pool as a result of that. This is in partnership with Cornell University as academic partner, and they go through series of coaches with our business leaders and lot of immersions that happens. Very, very aggressive 3.5 years program. The reason why it is very, very unique is because it's the time collapsed in terms of the time taken to kind of move up. So they actually get 2 promotions in 3.5 years, right? And then we kind of take them to that level. So we are at 45% women in the overall organization. We are 22% at the leadership level. And the program that we have right now will help us to kind of go to 30%, which is our target by 2025.
Yeah. So very quickly as Nasscom, what we are also trying to do is build an assessment framework, exactly as Jay said, from a TCS perspective, right? What gets measured gets done. So at an industry level also, there is this build-up of an assessment framework, which basically assesses organizations on different aspects or their journey of DEIB. So it has 4 components, talk about overall focus and impact an organization has. What are the diversity components? Do they measure, do they track, what's the percentage, etc. Equity in people practices, and inclusion and belonging. These are the 4 quadrants on which this assessment framework is worked upon. We're just trying to see if we can put this on a tool so that organizations could keep assessing themselves and keep taking future goals. To say on an index of 1 to 10, if you're 5 today, you could take a goal and say we want to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it could just go on year, right? So it's like self-assessing. And it has very pertinent questions, like if you're talking about persons with disability, then it would have a question to say, do you have somebody from a person with disability in your employee resource group, right? So, I mean, while you have an employee resource group to drive the agenda of persons with disability, but do you have somebody from this community to be driving it for you? I mean, that's about having inclusion and belonging as a concept, right? So with that, to you both, Jay and Alex, I think the next question is, while we've discussed about the innovative, the pioneering initiatives, but are there any challenges, and what are those challenges that we come across when we are building inclusion ground up?
So inclusion is essentially a journey. We all understand that, and having traveled some distance as an organization, we still believe that there is so much that we can do. The challenges that we believe, and they would continue to come because, as I said, more and more people join organizations, move from organizations, is about our ability to recognize our biases. And he spoke about it at the beginning, saying, do I understand conscious, unconscious biases? am I having a conversation about stereotypes? How am I challenging those stereotypes? What is the sponsorship that I have from business, from my leadership? How am I engaging with people? You know, the mantra that we believe internally is the secret sauce to being an inclusive organization is engagement, engagement, engagement. So you're saying, how do we engage with different stakeholders? How are we engaging with our clients? Are we having a dialogue with our clients there? So a challenge could be my ability to offer my sponsorship. How are we encouraging allyship? Because ally plays a very important role in building the culture of inclusion. Are we moving away from tokenism? Are we ready to accept that change will be difficult, but we need to move in that direction? Are we educating ourselves? That's a big challenge that we realize, considering that there are diverse segments. How are we educating ourselves continuously on what's happening in the LGBT inclusion space, or what's happening in race and ethnicity space? Or what can we do differently for our colleagues from the PWD community to feel more included? What are we doing in the space of accessibility? Are our products and services accessible? Is my ecosystem accessible? So these are some of the challenges that we foresee, and through various levers in the organization we are working towards it. We've covered a great journey, but there is still a lot of work to be done in that space.
Well, again, speak very specific to our industry, right? Take one initiative, like we have close to around 6,000 women who work for the group. Now, few years back, we were much less than that, and we wanted to drive the gender diversity as an initiative. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't want more women to work in the store, but there are very basic operational challenges. Like many states, you cannot employ women after 8 o'clock. And if you have to, then you have to provide them transportation. So that cost is kind of prohibitive for a retail kind of a cost structure. The second is you look at a majority of the business happens either in the evenings or on the weekends, right? Which means that you need to have 100% manning on weekends, Saturday and Sunday. And imagine if the woman of the home is not at home on Saturday and Sunday, and the husband is at home and the kids are at home. So that's a challenge. I still don't have a solution. And therefore you see, although we have around 28-29% women represented, but as you go up, we are less than 10%. If you look at our store managers, it will be less than 10%. So where are these going? These are the practical challenges because of which women do not want to continue in retail, because they have this challenge. They have to stay home with their kids, with their families. And retail is something, we don't have work from home. You have to be at the store. How do we manage this? So one initiative that we did very recently again is we announced it, we are going to launch it, is that especially for new mothers, while there's a maternity leave, for corporate office we said, okay, you can work from home for 10 days, right? You can come 10 days to work and 10 days. Then we said 90% of our women are at the stores. What do we do for them? So what we announced now, which we are going to implement, is that if you are a new mother, just returned from maternity, you only need to work 6 hours in the store for 6 months, right? And this is something that we feel will help us contain, women leaving the organization, maybe make it a little easier for them to continue and get some support back home. So these are some basic operational challenges that we face if we have to. And there's only one initiative. Talking about PWD, how do we grow them? What do they do next? So these are some basic challenges which we still don't have an answer to.
So for us as Nasscom, we've recently done a report which basically talks about the D&I landscape in India. So we looked at about 220 plus organizations, largely from tech, but some non-tech players as well. And this has given us a D&I index of where do we stand as an industry, right? So when we say persons with disability, we are less than 2%. So I think the challenge and the question that I have, considering the base is so high, right? what is that percentage change that we can do? I think some of the metrics that we've seen, that wherever CEOs are holding the charter, right, those organizations have women representation 40% plus. So there are those starking facts that have come out. There is still 56% of the organizations who have yet to do LGBTQIA plus training sessions, sensitization sessions. Right? So when we see the D&I landscape at such a length and breadth, I mean, I'm sure there are certain targets that you could take around sensitization, best practices, sharing, etc. But when it comes to changing the percentage, right, so even after so much of work that the tech sector has done around persons with disability, we still see 80% of people with disability in the junior roles, right? The senior is just about 13 to 15%. Now the question is, how much can the needle be moved, and what will it take for us as a country to move the needle, right? Because it is not about sectors, it's about everybody coming together and to be able to move the needle. To me, that looks like the biggest challenge. And we very strongly believe that inclusion is a CEO agenda and needs to be driven from the top. So the question that I have both for you, Rajnish and Sreya, is that as organizations, what are some of those strategies, or what is it that we need to do so that we could hold the CEOs responsible for this agenda? Or are we saying CEOs are currently responsible for the agenda?
Yeah, so firstly, I think inclusion is not just the right thing to do, it's a big business strategy, right? If you are not doing it today, you will see the impact of it in the next few years, 5 years, whatever. And even I would like to also start with the last question you'd asked. I think the biggest challenge, and in my experience of time spent in this space, is human mindset. And the solution is, it has to be, for each a different solution. For maybe a CEO, it needs to be maybe, looked at as a business strategy. For a manager, it should look like maybe their opportunity to grow in the organization. So for different people, different strategies, yes. But inclusion, and the lack of it is nothing but the human mindset. It's just that, nothing else. I think everything can be done. It's just that one step. To take that step, you need to tell yourself that this is doable, right? And when organizations just think of, so I would like to share Capgemini, Research Institute did their own research and came out with a white paper, which clearly shows that diverse organizations, diverse management teams are far more profitable. It also shows that diversity is the reason why we bring in innovation, right? So it is not just a good thing to do for a business, for a CEO, for those people who are driving the success, the sustenance of your organization. It clearly is what you need to do, right? So because it is a business strategy, you connect with clients, you get the right kind of partnership in the market, you get the right kind of talent, you become a talent, an organization that attracts top talent. All of these are directly leading to the success of the organization. And that is where CEOs need to understand that this is not just an HR activity, it is actually a discussion to be had in the boardroom. It is to be it is to be decided how the strategy will take place, with, let's say, how the sales head is going to look at it, how the HR is going to drive it, how are the business heads going to drive it. Everybody has a responsibility towards creating diversity and inclusion. And I think that is essentially how it gets successful. Of course, it is top driven, but I believe that through their direction, managers need to be empowered, because they are the ones who are reflecting the culture of the organization, right? they are the ones who work with people who drive outputs. So I think this is how it should be driven in an organization. Understand why it is required. Unless you understand why, you know, trying to do the good thing, I think nobody will say, I don't want to do the good thing, the right thing, right? But for a CEO, it's important that the organization is profitable as well and grows. So I think that is how you look at it.
So I think the question, Rajnish, is that are you facing a challenge to hold leaders or managers responsible for this? I think that's the pertinent question. I mean, not necessarily CEO. It could be business
No, I
sponsors.
see. You will always have challenges. I think, it can't, you, we'll be living in a very, you know, paradise if we don't see that there will be challenges. There's always challenges. Matter of fact, you have to be very intentional when it comes to areas like DNI. You can't not acknowledge that we are a smaller world of a larger world, right? I mean, that's what it is. End of the day, your organization is a representation of so many people, religious, ethnicity, gender. I mean, you can call anything, right? So that's your first part, that you acknowledge that it is basically a small world of a larger world, right? Now, uh, yeah, some CEOs may look at it as a fad. Some CEOs may look at it as it's important. I mean, I'll tell you what, our board today is 40% women. And it's an intentional effort to kind of ensure that we get more women to the board, right? And this has been driven by the CEO, right? There is the CEO scorecard, the conversations that we are having right now, inside the boardroom, right, has around diversity in terms of what each of the business leaders are doing, right? So unless and until you bring in, for example, what we are trying to achieve from a DNI perspective, as a part of your CEO or the CXO scorecard, these are essentially then conversations that probably an HR organization or somebody is having, which is good to have, and it has got no material impact within the organization. So you need to bring, to the CEO's scorecard and how they review meetings, right? So that's very, very important. So that's happening. We have a leadership council. The charter is the general counsel of the organization. Two of our chief business officers are in the council. I am there. And the head of global marketing is a part of this particular, the leadership council. All the tower leaders, we have created multiple towers. All the tower leaders are business leaders, which is like somebody looking at hiring, somebody looking at STEM for women, somebody looking at inclusive infrastructure. How do you kind of create infrastructure? Somebody looking at policies, right? These are all business leaders, HR leaders in the organization. The only way you bring in a change is when you involve the entire gamut of leadership into these initiatives. If we want to kind of run programs like these centrally from a DNI team or whatever it is, you may be successful. I'm not saying you can't be, but it'll be very difficult to kind of go ahead and influence probably leaders, because unless leaders are involved and they're a part of this whole initiative, I think these could be there, but it may not be as impactful as it should be, right? So that's how we have approached this whole thing. So there's a lot of leadership involvement, and we also trying to kind of review it as a part of the QBRs and MBRs.
Jay, Alex, any thoughts?
So something very similar for us as well. I spoke about diversity maturity metrics. We do it for business units. We do it for the organization quarter-on-quarter basis. We track where we are. For us, our CEO is the champion for equity. It starts from the top. The sponsorship comes from the top. The accountability comes from the top in terms of various areas that needs attention, and of course then it percolates further down. We have various mechanisms. We have diversity councils. We have 13 ERGs that are sponsored both centrally by the culture and diversity team and locally by the leadership, either in the geography or the business domain. So I think we are beyond the stage where, for a lack of better expression, we have to sell that inclusion and diversity is a business imperative. We are now moving away from what needs to be done to essentially saying how it is to be done. So there is complete sponsorship, ownership, accountability, top down for inclusion to be successful.
So in terms of commitment from the CEOs and the leaders, I think it's definitely there. But is it mainstream? I don't think so. It is still good to have. And in fact, I think if you look at what is the CEO's performance measured against, not internally, externally, right? It's based on profitability, valuation, the Sensex, how it's going up and down. One of the things I would really encourage, I think we have Nasscom representatives here, Mr. Nagesh here, Rai here. I think if we can have an index, which is a DEI index, for organizations, which is published, I think CEOs are trained to look at numbers, right? I think if it is profitability and sales, I think they will deliver it. I think the moment we have a DEI index for organizations, it will automatically get done because that's how. And the business impact of diversity is, I think, proven beyond doubt. But it's more about measurability. Can we measure it? Can we hold someone accountable for it? What is it in for them to drive something like that? I think it has to move from good to have to mainstream, data.
Just one point. I think if you have an ESG, agenda, then I think it's anyway getting measured because diversity actually now dovetails the overall ESG parameters. So it's actually getting measured in many ways. For CEO, I'm sure the CEO performance has a huge linkage to the ESG parameters.
Yeah. So there is this BRSR reporting, which basically will start asking us about gender pay parity and diversity index in our respective organizations. So I think it will get interlinked. But it just gives me this thing of a very practical example that somebody gave it to me. I think this business sponsor from Capgemini, and we were talking to her to say, how do you manage to get this agenda mainstream? And she was not from the DNI or the HR team. And the answer that she had was that I have convinced my customers on what this agenda brings on the table. I think that's a very, very practical way of managing something, right? And today she said, my business comes to me and say that in this particular project, this is the kind of diversity that we think is a must. Now, even if that does not get 100% plus productivity, but that's become a mainstream agenda to have that percentage of diversity in every business project. So to me, that is a very, very practical example. And to what Rajnish said and Jay said is about involving the whole organization. And I think that's what we as tech sector are promoting, is to have those employee resource group, those business sponsors. And a lot of people come to me and say, within Nasscom, do you know this organization, this person? And I'm saying, boss, in an organization, there are 20 people managing the D&I agenda. So, and every day you discover more and more people, right? So there are some ERG heads, there are some BRG heads, there are some business sponsors. So I continuously keep saying, I don't know who's going to be my sponsor, so let me connect with everybody and anybody. I think that's what the tech sector has reached. So the next question that I have is that, how do we make these initiatives more sustaining and ever evolving? And we could take this from you, Rajnish, and then.
I mean, I think this is weather versus climate. This is a climate change, in my opinion. It requires years of efforts to kind of go ahead and see changes, tangible changes. You might see sporadic changes. I think the way I'm looking at it is we are influencing policies, right? We are influencing our infrastructure. we're creating awareness. And these are things that are now part and parcel of the way we run, right? We're trying to kind of embed the whole DNI from a cultural lens, right? We're trying to kind of move the culture bit to the performance management also. We're saying that we will go ahead and now look at, all our employees with two filters, performance and culture. Like, how are you influencing the culture positively? And obviously, what are you doing as far as performance is concerned? So the only way you can make things sustainable is when, you bring something very fuzzy, which is called inclusion, into this whole fold of culture, and then kind of go ahead and actually look at people, during a performance management process. You speak with managers to find out whether they're living the values or they're not living the values. And I guess that's how we're kind of looking at it. So our continuous focus on education, our infrastructure upgrade, policies, making sure that the right kind of policies reflect, dovetails the overall vision of the organization in terms of where we want to be. And making sure that we culturally kind of look at our employee base and managers and leaders to ensure that, this is not just just talk, but we are walking the talk, ensuring that, we are taking the right decisions whenever we see contrary view or a contrary, behavior.
We believe that change is sustainable when it is personal. So, our idea is, how do we really make inclusion a personal agenda for every individual in the organization, be it someone from the community, be it an ally? Can we start with education? Can we engage with them on understanding inclusive language? Can we have a conversation on allyship? I may not be from the LGBTQ community, but I believe that the group is marginalized and needs allyship. So can we have a dialogue in that space? So we believe that, you're talking to a group of experts in retail, what is visible influences choices and decisions. I mean, you guys know it better than us. So how can we bring this, or offer more visibility to inclusion? Can we bring in leaders from within who are talking more about it? Can we bring in our associates from different communities and offer them more visibility? Can we engage with experts from the industry who can come and share their thought process with us and help us guide what we design in future? So what is visible influences choices, what is visible influences decisions, and then our endeavor is that inclusion is everybody's business. And the idea is to make it personal so that we can sustain this journey.
Yeah, so I think that really, works with everyone, because if it becomes personal, then it really does help you or motivate you to do further. I think how Capgemini does it. See, I have seen leaders change, or maybe the DNI team change, and suddenly something is no longer a priority, something else is a priority, and DNI is always a journey. So I think it's important to embed it at every level. We've added how we progress on our inclusion journey in our India business reviews, which basically happens with the group. Within India, every business leader has it in their dashboards. With every manager, we talk of how they are getting sensitized, trained. We look at their team sizes. All of this gets measured. And one of the things that we did this year is to get leaders to talk about inclusion, right? What is happening is that you hear, somebody in the DNI team, HR team, or maybe the CEO talk about inclusion. So what we did was we got all of our VPs to have these small focus group discussion on inclusion, and talk to their own team members and see how it can be progressed. So it is not just a team of people who are talking, it's everyone talking the same language. And eventually, like you said, make it personal. There are employee resource groups, and these groups are formed of people who are either part of the community or allies, right? So they continue this journey, even when there is a change, let's say in the DNI team, or there is a change, so you make them independent and you make them run on their own. So you will see that this journey continues to happen with people around.
Yeah, I think the focus should be a lot on awareness, right? I think the more people are made aware of DEI, the more sustainable it will become. The second is also constantly look at different slices of data to come out with which are those marginalized groups. I think it's a journey which is never ending. You'll always find some group which is not being represented, or the voice is not being heard or given opportunities, and to keep constantly looking at that with different lenses and make it more and more cover different groups.
Just 5 seconds. We are also using technology because I just want to make sure that I mentioned that technology is used to kind of, we're experimenting it right now. It's about nudging and notifying people to do a few things at the right time. Have you kind of gone ahead and spoken to your team member? Have you recognized somebody? So we're trying to use technology to kind of drop those notifications to people so that they're doing the right thing.
Here are some examples that come into my mind. How could you make inclusion a sustaining and ever-evolving space? So there's this organization called Wipro. What they've done basically is that there's this unconscious, conscious bias questions that they've put on the desktop of every individual, right? Every time you do an act, you can actually classify to say, is it a conscious or an unconscious bias? I mean, that's how inclusion could become self-sustaining and ever-evolving. And certain thoughts from a Nasscom standpoint for the industry, I think celebrating diversity and inclusion is something by which you could make this initiative self-sustaining and ever-evolving. And I quite like this idea. Just before our panel, there were these videos playing, right? And I kept looking at the sponsors. Were these videos only of the sponsors? But they were not. These were videos of true inclusion stories that kind of came out to say, working with different organizations. And I think that's what we as Nasscom are also saying. Can we intersect? Can we make this mainstream and intersect this with everything that we do at Nasscom? Every event of ours, right? Like we just did a tech event and we had these inclusion stories come out of people deaf, dumb, or different inclusion stories. The idea is to see how have they navigated their journey and get them mainstream, right? Not just do one exclusion summit only for them, because that's again excluding. So that's the thing that comes into our mind, is how do we keep inspiring, and not only inspiring by awards, right? These could be smaller messaging, because there are a lot of newer organizations who are taking the journey, and they will take a lot of time to reach an award stage, right? Because the jury will look at the metrics of where you are and where you are not. But if there are organizations who've started the journey and taken the journey, if there's a way we could amplify that messaging, I think that will encourage more and more companies take this charter and make this self-sustaining and ever-evolving. I think our time is up, so I'm not asking the last thing of saying, but any last minute question? I think we just have time for one question anybody wants to ask, or otherwise we are here to engage.
Anybody?
Okay. What does that mean? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Thank you.